Hey, folks, welcome back to the Pulse. My name is Matt. This is Crypto Heartbeat. It is 4 o'clock Central Texas time, and I am so glad you joined. This is going to be an old school pump stream, folks. I'm going to remind you because you need to be reminded of why in the world you're still here. And, folks, that's what this one's all about. Special shout out to Magnus for asking and asking again for this stream. I've been quiet for quite a while. I do a Friday podcast called Right Side Up. And that's about it. And just working in the background. And I'm going to tell you, folks, I feel the need to communicate with you about where we are, how I see things, and why you shouldn't let your heart be troubled too much. Fear not, my friends. Fear not, my friends. We got some great people in the chat. This is going to be a big one. You're going to want to do all the necessary things. You're going to want to share this out. If you're on Twitter, all those things, please share it out. Like it. We're going to get into some really cool stuff. And I'm going to make the case for the fact that the PulseChain isn't just some convenient, cheaper fees, folks. Oh, it's like this. It's got the world's largest airdrop. No, it's a necessity or something very much like it. And I think Richard is telegraphing to us that he is doing things a certain way. And I want to decipher that for you because so many people are caught up in meme coin land. You got to understand what's at stake here. It's big stuff. So we're back again. Let's say hello to you. Ego Foundation is here. What's up? Hello, my friend. Funkmaster Hex with the CHB, the heart and the drink. Academaciated. Good to see you, Magnus. My man. My man. You're the inspiration. You are the inspiration. Blue collar grunt. I'm already rich in spirit. And folks, I trapped you into this one. Did you get rich? His name is Richard Hart. Did you get him? I'm going to help you get him today. You need to understand how to get rich, not rich money, how you get this guy named Richard Hart, because it might actually lead to what you were thinking it meant. Not yet, Sam Kemp says. Hello, Taryn. What's going on? Crypto Elite. Here we go. If you're out there, please make a comment. We're pumping it up today. Like, good attitude. And I think that for good reason. I'm going to give you a lot of perspective because I've been thinking about this a whole lot. When Moon, I am strong, but I'm tired. Amen to that. Degen, Dougie Peach. We got the usual suspects here. Collins, Crypto, Rex City, absolutely. Hex Force 1 is here. Evo, HOA, Hex on Air. What's going on? It's been a while. Good to see you. Drix, what's up? All the great people of the PulseChain ecosystem, the RH ecosystem. What's up, Hexicans? Tin Top is back. That Tesla, still poor, still sad. It's all right. Steve Wright from Santa Barbara. Crypto Heartbeat Hipster. Heartbeat glad to be on this live call. Go ahead, caller. Hex Glenn, what's up? Dude, this is great. 49 people already. I appreciate it, especially when people are so discouraged. And so I'm going to encourage you. The first thing I want to read to you, though, is who Richard Hart is. And I want you to understand something about him because I'm going to build this case for why you need to hang on. Really need to hang on. So I'm a fan of personality inventories. I don't know if you are, but personality types. There's a lot of different tools out there, but they're a pretty good way of helping you understand, how am I wired? How are others wired around me? If you're somebody that utilizes personality inventories or has used them in business or in hiring or anything, let me know in the chat. It'd be really nice to know. I've used it extensively, and I've taught it, and it's been really, really helpful because somebody told me one time, they said, if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. If you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. Well, what does that mean? It's the classic situation, right? The football player jock dad has a baby boy. He puts the football in the crib. And then when his son turns 13, he says, Dad, I just want to dance in the ballet. And his dad goes, what did I do wrong? Oh, man, I'll tell you what. Folks, we see through a lens, a colored glass, if you will, rose-colored glasses, and you see things from your perspective. And if you've been married for very long, you realize not everybody sees things the way you see it. And so you've got to listen first. Seek first to understand, then to be understood. The great Stephen Covey mentioned, it's pretty good practice to keep your mouth shut and listen because people will tell you who they are. I've watched a lot of Richard Hart, and I'm sure you have as well. And I want you to understand something. And I'm going to share with you, and I'm building a case here. There's a lot of good content coming your way today. And so get ready for it. But the first and foremost, I want you to see the personality type of Richard Hart. And let's talk about what we know about him. Richard Hart, besides being wealthy at the beginning, is Mensa smart, meaning he's got an IQ off the charts. We know this. He's a smart guy. But also he's extremely strategic. And he's someone who has said, I'm in it for the glory. What does it mean, the glory? Right now, it's very difficult for you to see any glory, right? Down 98% or whatever it may be. And you look across the board and you're like, man, with SEC stuff and all these things, how could we possibly win? And of course, I was here 2 days after Big Payday getting into Hex. And it was really interesting because I'd never experienced this kind of thing before. I mean, it was up 40% in one day. I remember taking a screenshot and sending it to my buddy Ray. I'm like, this is crazy. Folks, things can change in a minute. But you know as well as I do that these things come in cycles. And I'm just going to give you the way I look at it. I do not believe we're going to see parabolic until the election. And I'm telling you that right now. That's my personal opinion. And what does that come from? Go to an Ethereum chart and pull it up. I'm not going to pull it up. You can do this yourself. I mean, a plain old non-log Ethereum chart. And look at the last top of the last cycle. And then go to where it hit that all-time high. Okay? How long was that? And now take the top, the last top, all-time high, and take the same amount of days and go forward. Guess what that is? That's the 6th of November. Hey, that's the day after Election Day. Isn't it bizarre that these things follow not only very typical cycles, but also coincide with human emotions? That's what charts do. 80 people here. Thanks for being here. Appreciate you so much. Checks my pulses here. What is going on? And Anthony Munoz, Harpy, patience is a virtue, my friend. Isn't that the truth? Okay, so we've established this fact that I personally believe that this election is a big thing. We may see with with the Federal Reserve lowering rates by, I think, 1/4 point in September, it's going to stimulate some things. We're seeing more and more people, Bitcoin for, I think it's out of the Middle East, using Bitcoin to pay salaries. There's all kinds of news of people using this thing more. We've got Trump and all the things he's talked about with crypto being crypto friendly and better regulations. And then, of course, we see the platform of the DNC, and the DNC doesn't have anything about crypto there. And they announced, and I don't know if this is supposed to benefit anyone, that they would that Kamala Harris would, if she was president, make Gary Gensler the Fed chairman. Hey, that sounds like a great idea. And who thought maybe that releasing that information would be good for independent voters? You think everybody like that? I don't see that helping anyone vote for her. But you know what? There was a guy that won by living in his basement, so they can do anything. They're miracle workers. Jay Pond, what's going on? Good to see you here. Thanks for being here. So let's jump into something here, which is I want you to see the personality of Richard Hart. And so if you've ever done a personality inventory, you will find that there's at least the ones that I like, the Myers-Briggs, which is pretty old school. And this comes from Carl Jung. Ultimately, Keirsey came together, Myers-Briggs stuff, Keirsey temperament, refined these things. But these are essentially 16 personality types. And so I want to break it down for you. But Richard Hart is, and I'm confident of this, I'm going to read it to you. And you tell me if this matches what you see in Richard Hart. Okay? All right, I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to show you this. He is what is called the INTJ. Okay, so these are the personality types have different, essentially, letters that represent things. The I is for introverted, which I'm sure, if you understand the old school Richard, you've seen him twerking and all that. You say, oh, he's an extrovert. No, he's an introvert. He gets his energy from thinking, right? He's not an extroverted person. This guy is one who has to recharge, I can tell. He's intuitive in his thinking, but he makes decisions based on facts and figures and information, and is a judger rather than a perceiver. And this is what's called the mastermind or the architect. Okay, so those are the two names that this is given. And I want you to see this and listen to this. So this is the INTJ, the mastermind in a nutshell. INTJs are analytical problem solvers eager to improve systems and processes with their innovative ideas. They have a talent for seeing possibilities for improvement, whether at work or home or in themselves, often intellectual. INTJs enjoy logical reasoning and complex problem solving. They approach life by analyzing the theory behind what they see and are typically focused inward on their own thoughtful study of the world around them. INTJs are drawn to logical systems and are much less comfortable with the unpredictable nature of other people and their emotions. They're typically independent and selective about their relationships, preferring to associate with people who find intellectually stimulating. INTJs are perceptive about systems and strategies and often understand the world as a chessboard to be navigated. That sounds familiar. They want to understand how systems work and how events proceed. The INTJ often has a unique ability to foresee logical outcomes. They enjoy applying themselves in a project or idea in depth and putting in concentrated effort to achieve their goals. They have a hunger for knowledge and strive to constantly increase their competence. They're often perfectionists with extremely high standards of performance for themselves and others, and they tend to have a keen interest in self-improvement and are lifelong learners, always looking to add to their base of information and awareness. How they see others. They're typically reserved and serious and seem to spend a lot of time thinking. They're curious about the world around them. And they often want the principle behind what they see. They thoroughly examine the information they receive, and if asked a question, will typically consider it at length before presenting a careful, complex answer. INTJs think critically and clearly and often have an idea about how to do something more efficiently. They can be blunt in their presentation. Oh, really? And often communicate in terms of larger strategy, leaving out the details. Although INTJs are usually warm and particularly gregarious, they tend to have self-assured manner with people on their own, security in their intellect, security in their intelligence. Sorry. They relate their ideas with confidence, and once they've arrived at a conclusion, they fully expect others to see the wisdom in their perceptions. They're typically perfectionists and appreciate the environmental and intellectual challenge, and they enjoy discussing interesting ideas and may get themselves into trouble because of their take no prisoners attitude. If someone's beliefs don't make logical sense, the mastermind typically has no qualms about pointing it out. Folks, Richard Hart is an INTJ. He is a mastermind architect. Well, okay, there's 16 types. He fits into that one, in my opinion, the most. What does that tell us? Well, here's a guy who says, I want the glory. He's obviously applied his intellect and his personality into what his endeavors, and he's been successful in that. There's a lot of evidence the guy's got a lot of resource, right? He even said to me when I interviewed him, he said, they can't make stuff. I've bought it all. There's nothing to buy. That was back in the heyday of all the outrage marketing. What's interesting about it is everybody's like, oh, where's Richard? Of course, we have the SEC case and, whatever that entails relates to communicating. But I think what's really important right now, especially in this time where literally people are devouring each other at a really rapid rate, is to remind ourselves of what is really at stake. And so I wanted to present that and juxtapose it against this. This is the core of why the PulseChain is imperative. And I think this is what Richard has seen ahead of us. And you need to hear this. You need to share this out. Honestly, this is really, really important stuff.
A lot of these people have spent an insane amount of money rebranding themselves as philanthropists. So I think one figure that was sort of exposed as doing that during the COVID era, of course, is someone like Bill Gates, right? Who has spent a lot of money framing himself as altruistic and as a philanthropist. But a lot of these guys do that. And in reality, this is something from the playbook that was taken from J.D. Rockefeller, the United States' first billionaire, who was very much hated for what he was doing to the country, back in the early 20th century, and tried to rebrand himself as a philanthropist, and did so with the help of people like Edward Bernays, who is considered the father both of propaganda and public relations, which I guess you could argue public relations is essentially propaganda for the corporate sector. But there's been a lot of manipulations on the public in trying to change our perception of who these people are and what they do. But consistently, these particular networks, a lot of whom are connected to organized crime, have been engaging crisis after crisis that the world has experienced in massive wealth transfers for us to them. And COVID's a great example of that. Where so many people that seem to have apparent foreknowledge that something drastic was coming were able to benefit so hugely economically, while the rest of us obviously have been left in a very different situation. And it's true if you look at the 2008 financial crisis or any number of other financial crises, that have happened in the past 100 years. You have pretty consistent wealth transfer to the point where like the 0.1% of the world have such an insane amount of wealth and power at this point And we're still being so manipulated by them to the point where, at least in the United States right now, people are clamoring for competing squads of billionaires to save the country. So, you might have Donald Trump and Elon Musk on one side, and then all the Democratic Party donors, many of whom are from Silicon Valley, like Eric Schmidt and Pierre Omidyar and a lot of these other big names, these oligarch figures, which billionaire faction is going to save us all. But ultimately, at the end of the day, they've been stealing our wealth and convincing us to give away our freedoms in exchange for what they promise as security. But we don't get security. We just get less and less freedom. And we're essentially being herded into what I would argue is sort of a technocratic nightmare, the cornerstone of which is this digital ID agenda, which is meant to be linked to some sort of digital wallet that contains programmable, surveillable money, either a CBDC issued by a central bank or issued by a private bank. And I think ultimately what people need to do is not focus so much on these political saviors being put out in front of us, but focus on what we're going to do to not comply with the digital ID agenda and these other things that they need in order to push us into this world that they've been building. And I would really appreciate it if people would focus on that again, because I think there was a lot of consciousness generated around that during COVID, for example, where people rightly, in my opinion, pointed out that vaccine passports are really sort of a trial run for a lot of this broader digital ID stuff. But, the digital ID stuff is marching full speed ahead. And now in the United States, a lot of the people that were critical of it as vaccine passports are essentially calling for it. I mean, you have people like Trump on the campaign trail saying the U.S. desperately needs a biometric entry-exit system. And you have this campaign lawyer going on podcasts saying we need to scan our face and our eyeballs in order to be able to vote in the United States. If we need voter ID, why can't we just use a physical ID? Or something like that? Why does it have to be biometric and digital? And then you see that, the Trump campaign, just like the Democratic Party, are beholden to these Silicon Valley donors. A good example of that would be Trump's recent VP pick, J.D. Vance, who was intimately tied up with Peter Thiel, who created a CIA-funded data mining companies that are surveilling Americans and profiling them for intelligence based on our online activity, and are very much invested in these digital ID agendas and digital wallet agendas. And these programmable, surveillable currencies. And again, I think we need to focus more on what we can do as people and as communities, and not think that we can just sit back in our armchair and just vote, once every 4 years or once every, X number of years between election cycles, and everything's going to be magically better. I think people need to take responsibility and think about what we can do as people to opt out of these systems that they're trying to impose on us.
We need to opt out of these systems that are being imposed upon us. Okay. This is about, did you get rich? Do you get Richard Hart? Do you understand what he is doing? Okay. And I think when you back out and you stop and you look at this, what is necessity for the future? Richard Hart was the first one to say, hey, we're going to do this sacrifice for Pulse for freedom of speech. And I think at that time, you're like, okay, there's this like just some kind of made up thing. It's an excuse to do an ICO without an ICO. I mean, that's what I first saw it as. I was like, oh, yeah, this is just another way to do something without saying it's something. Hang on a second. I did not realize that this mastermind architect of Richard Hart was ahead of us. Then it was freedom of movement. And so, what's interesting is as these things were happening, he was ahead of the game when it came to things like the Canadian truckers and all of that stuff. But now you see the agenda and where it's going. And what did he talk about after that? Privacy. Yeah, it's hard to move. It's hard to transact if you don't have privacy. Well, what's interesting about the PulseChain and this whole idea of copying this thing with its system state and moving it over is that in order for us to have something that is truly an alternative financial system, it's going to have to be properly decentralized. It's going to have to be literally, it's going to have all the components and infrastructure of a vertical alignment. It needs to not be OFAC compliant, right? So where are you going to transact? And so what's happening right now is everybody's comparing everything kind of apples to apples and saying, well, look at Solana and look at all this stuff. Folks, we haven't really entered any sense of a bull run for Ethereum and the altcoins, okay? You could say, well, you can point to the bottom of Bitcoin. But if you think about what everybody's anticipating, what you're hoping for is a super cycle, the banana zone, as Raoul Pal would call it. And we haven't seen it yet. And we're like, well, we need a catalyst for that to happen. I want you to back out and look at it the way I think Richard Hart is seeing it. He's seeing it as a mastermind. He's known this stuff in advance. Is that what's happening is this surveillance state, right? And Whitney Webb points this out extremely well, is that essentially we're marching forward. This is the big money, right? This is like, and I don't get into like Illuminati stuff, but at the end of the day, these are the people, the power brokers who have the resources that have stolen our wealth, right? Whether it's come out because of, direct taxation, or it comes out in other ways like, debasing the currency and inflation. It's going to come out. I saw a video today, Milton Friedman talking about the fact that every budget of the government is balanced. You just don't see it, right? Because you end up paying for it. Ultimately, it balances itself out because either they print more, it affects you in a non-direct taxation way. And so if you think about it, we're on this, trajectory. And I think Richard's seen this ahead of time. And so all of these pieces that fit into this, here's Richard Hart, right? We call him kind of this independent cypherpunk billionaire. Well, who are we expecting to save us? And somebody wrote this in there. Oh, is it like Richard Hart's going to save us? Yeah. Collins Crypto says, wouldn't Richard Hart be a savior billionaire? Yeah. Look at all of us. We're like, who's going to advocate for us? But I think the question really is that the tools are neutral, right? Think about this. Tools are neutral. They get animated with a certain nature and character. And so if your whole goal is to take a tool and to extract value or to gain more control and more power and all of those things, there's a playbook to that. But if you want to do something that serves the people, how would you animate the tool? How differently would you animate the tool? And what's interesting about in this new world of CBDCs, whether it be private or public banks, there's going to be a tandem agreement between all these different central banks to accept this CBDC that's government based. And then what ends up happening is right now you're like, oh, I'll never take that. I'll never take the mark of the beast. I'll never take that thing. Well, until you're out of money and there's, a lockdown or some other health emergency, and they say, well, it's time now I give you your portion of the universal basic income, or this is your stimulus money. And there are people that are just between a rock and a hard place and they have to take it. Well, what is required of you? Digital ID, social credit score, all of those things, right? We know that is coming regardless. So Richard sees these things ahead of time. And so the big question is this: you can't transact unless you've got the rails to run on. Well, what does it require? Well, you have to be able to transact in a vertically aligned ecosystem if you're going to have an alternative. And so what is this thing that's being built here? Well, everybody just wants the latest pump, right? Oh, yeah, what's the token? How can I get rich? Well, guess what? Your money's not really valuable if it continues to be printed indiscriminately, right? That value just gets sucked out of it. You hope that you win in the short term, but if you back out and consider others in addition to yourself, we are going to hell in a handbasket. So, here's Richard Hart, the INTJ. Who is he? The mastermind architect. What is he doing? He's saying, hey guys, we need to have a stable coin. Well, all of this rumor of all of the things as it relates to PDI, and you know what? I've talked about it many times. I'm not somebody who is advocating that you buy PDI, but there has to be a stable coin that ultimately is quote unquote, I guess, algorithmic, meaning it's not tied to centralized authority. Because if you look at Circle right now and USDT, folks, these things are centralized, and pretty much all of the other stable coins are. There's not one. It needs one. So there are things that are missing in this ecosystem that if they were there would help. There's a lot of things on the back end of infrastructure of PulseChain that are not there, like GraphQL stuff. Like there's not infrastructure for builders. This is far from being an alternative financial system. But if you look at what's coming, I want to encourage you that you're not stupid for being here. Why? It's not because, well, I just hope that I get my 10,000X, right? And I can get out and win Lambo. No, you have to realize that there has to be an alternative financial system built. Whether it's done by Richard Hart ecosystem or not, we'll see. But it has to be there. Otherwise, you're going to be locked into a system where literally if they don't like what you do, they turn you off. Case in point, Edward Snowden spoke at Bitcoin 2024. And he gave a warning. And he's spoken at many of these before. And what did he say? And I encourage you to go and listen to it yourself. Edward Snowden basically said, guys, this is great, but here's the thing. This transparent blockchain, people right now, agencies of all sorts of letter types, are basically taking in all of these transactions and analyzing them. And so what ends up happening is there's somebody that's sitting as an analyst at a terminal, and they're going to literally see these transactions come through. Well, there's 95% of this is normal transactions, right? These things are acceptable. But then there's about 5% that are a bit anomalous. And then they're going to continue to squeeze down into that 1% and go, hang on a second. And somebody at a terminal is going to be able to flag that and turn you off. And if you're anyone that accumulates any significant amount of crypto that's outside of their purview, this is the whole system, is that I have the ability to turn you off. right? I can literally stop you economically. And that's control. That's ultimately this authoritarian state. And the question is, do you want to support that? Well, I want Lambo. I want, okay, fine, fine. But if you want to understand how I see what Richard's building, he's not building it for giggles. He talks about the glory. Well, what is the glory? Freeing the damn captives. This is slavery, folks. We're literally being ushered into shackles of slavery if we're not already there. And so, where are we going to invest our time, energy, and effort? Is there anyone that we see out in the landscape who's smart, who's strategic, who understands, and is wealthy? Yeah, Richard Hart, maybe Charles with or Cardano, maybe, but there's only a couple guys left. The rest of them are in jail or dead. Who's left? And so if I was Richard Hart sitting there, right, and everybody's like, well, why isn't he putting the SAC funds in? Folks, no one wants to throw money into a hole. These things are on cycles. You should know that. This cycle, in my opinion, isn't going to go banana zone until the election. And then we've got some weird stuff. We've got all kinds of wars and rumors of wars and all this stuff and sideways, and people are upset and literally devouring each other because there's nothing to do. It will change. These things are cycles and they will change, and you have to hang on. But this could be an ultimate super cycle. Why? Because everyone's going to see the way the governments are going, and they're going to go to CBDCs. And if you think about it, we've already sacrificed Bitcoin on the altar of decentralization. And that's a quote from Axis Alive. Well, why? What have we done? It's already centralized, right? Hash power plus hardware, mining hardware. Bitcoin's gone, folks. Ethereum's already partnered up, already OFAC compliant. And I'm not suggesting that we should, support terrorism. But at the end of the day, more bad is done with cash than is with crypto. It's going digital. So are we going to build the alternative financial system or not? And so I've advocated for what is the PulseChain? The PulseChain isn't just a copy of Ethereum. PulseChain is the alternative financial system. And right now it's like, well, I'm comparing it to all these other things until you can't transact. And then it's going to be the only thing standing. I think we'll participate in this next thing. And here's the other reason why I think that's the case. So now back to Richard Hart. Richard Hart has a significant amount of resources on his own, right? Bitcoin, all of the stuff that he has prior to, let's say, the sacrifice, right? Because everybody wants to say the sacrifice money. The sacrifice money is sat. There's criticism of him for buying the local top of Ethereum. Fine. He's getting yield in Spark protocol. Okay, great. What's really fascinating, though, is these little things that we see that he's telegraphing to people that are paying attention. And at the end of the day, all these people that are getting shaken out, what I've realized is, and I'll give you a bit of an anecdote. When I first got into streaming, I met a guy named Crypto Panda. Crypto Panda. What a wonderful guy. And Crypto Panda said to me, you know what? I got involved in crypto in the 2017-2018 cycle, and it just was terrible. And he was really like, it sucked. And I had no context to that because I wasn't in crypto. I wasn't like destroyed by that cycle. But I could tell in his voice and talking to him how terrible it was. It left a lot of big scars. Guess what? A lot of us have had a lot of scars in this bear market. We have disappointment, all those things. And I think in order for things to actually go up, everything has to be burned to the ground. And that's the unfortunate part of this. And the smart people knew that. There's a handful of folks in the Hex and Pulse community that knew that as soon as the money was sucked out, they were out. And that's why these things crash 85 to 95%. Add an SEC lawsuit in it and you get what you get. But here's the thing that I know is true. Richard Hart is in it for the glory. Okay, so if he just wanted money, he'd be gone. We wouldn't even know about him, right? He had the money long ago. And there's an indication that it's a significant amount of wealth, billions, right? Okay, so let's say there's 600 million, and I'll just use that for conversation's sake. That is like the SAC money, if you will. When would you deploy money, right? If green candles drag people in, and in case in point, I just want to share with you this funny picture, just as a case for this. Somebody out there right now is pumping Bitcoin Cash on the PulseChain, right? Look at this. Somebody is pumping Bitcoin Cash on the PulseChain with buys that are not even over $500. Okay. And what's really interesting to me, forever nothing. And then what makes somebody want to, buy Bitcoin Cash? and just pump. It's the same person just buying $300 to $400 worth of this stuff. Why? Because you are drawn to moth, to flame, to green candles, and people get sucked into that stuff. And over the last 4 hours, somebody decided to pump, the Pulse version of Bitcoin Cash. I'm not suggesting you go out and buy Bitcoin Cash. It's just an example of what happens is when people see things move, they're drawn to it like moth to flame. Well, you wouldn't throw good money after bad, right? Because right now, if you threw money into it, there's a certain amount of people that are going to get out at sack rate. There's going to be people that have to get out because they have to survive. And so they bleed out. This is the burning of that forest, and that's going to happen. But things are going to turn because they have to turn. We're seeing all the leading indicators of this. It's already essentially priced in. And so when it goes, it's going to go so hard, it's going to blow your mind. It is going to absolutely blow your mind. Richard basically made a call quite a while ago of what the next top in Bitcoin was going to be. He said $241,500. So just plot that out yourself. Bitcoin at 241.5, and I think he's probably being a little bit conservative. What does that look like? That's an interesting top. What does that put Ethereum at? 15 to 17,000? Okay, it's interesting. But here is the point. The PulseChain. Richard Hart's baby is called Hex, and he essentially sacrificed eHex on the altar of Ethereum, and now we have pHex. It's his baby. In many cases, he's been quoted as saying he was going to get the Nobel Prize for creating Hex. Who am I to say? I'm not on that committee. But that's his baby. And I'm going to tell you, when you birth something so impressive like Hex, you do not want it to die or to languish. So $600 million, let's say, and it's debatable that amount. But what happens when Ethereum continues to go up? It goes past 4,000. It goes to 6,000, 8,000, 10,000, 12,000. Interesting. What do you think happens with bonded liquidity on the PulseChain? What do you think happens with those SEC money? There are going to be days, I'll bet you there will be days of 50 to 70% gains in Hex. And it's not just Hex, but these things are all bonded together. But then there's the other consideration, and that is what the developers of PulseChain did with the maker contract. There's pretty good evidence of that, right? Taking over the maker contract. Well, that's the PDI piece of this. The strategy on this isn't just, well, I just thought I'd just copy this thing over. No, he's creating an alternative financial system. And what are the challenges? Well, there's not a wallet, but there are some wallet options. Okay. What else is missing? Well, fiat on and off. Well, there's a point in which you won't need fiat off or fiat on because it's going to all be digital. But there's pieces of this, right? Security protocols. What are we using? What's going to be used? There's a lot of infrastructure on the backside of PulseChain that's not there for devs to build on, right? So this is very incomplete. But folks, I'm going to tell you, if you're somebody who's just trying to get out or somebody that got out, you're going to be sorry. I really believe you're going to be sorry. Why? Because it's not just well, the cycle shifted and people come. No, green candles. I don't care what they are. Look at people. Pump.fun. Look at these people that are going crazy over stupidity. The majority of the marketplace follows a white light. They're green. It's a green light, honestly. Green candles. That's what they follow. We saw it before. We'll see it again. But when is that time? In my opinion, it's not until really the election. It might come a little bit before that if it prices it in and we see this. But folks, I'm going to tell you, there's really two outcomes here. On the 18th of September, if they put Donald Trump in jail, things could get spicy, right? Very spicy. But then the election, right? On both sides of this, it's crazy, right? If Kamala wins with absolutely no sense at all, we're probably civil war, just like we are when, if they put him in jail. The other side of this thing is Trump wins. A guy and what he's been basically saying, if he follows through with half of the stuff, like all Bitcoin made in the USA, those kind of things. Well, what does that suggest for people building, right? When we look at building things, we're like, what jurisdiction are you going to be in? Who's friendly? Who has actually defined crypto regulation? Certainly not the United States. So if you look at the future and you think Whitney Webb might have some sense of what's going on, these banksters, right? These people have literally stolen from us, and the music's about to end. And so their last ditch effort is really going to be a universal basic income because of the robots. Oh, the robots. Where are you going to be able to transact, right? That you're not basically stopped from. Well, it has to be vertically aligned. It has to operate on its own. There's no real hope for transactions outside of surveillance unless there is something that is properly decentralized, follows the true tenets of DeFi. And there's one guy that I'd put my money on. And it's a one horse to ride. But right now, for those of you who are just like, well, I just want to make a buck, you don't care about the long-term future. But I'm going to tell you, I mean, even if you look at things from a spiritual perspective, there's a case for there being some sort of wallet or some sort of technology that if you don't have it, you can't buy or sell. Sound familiar? Folks, we're fast approaching that. And there's a lot of evidence. Whitney Webb, go deep on that stuff and you'll see it. But this is ultimately, what the WEF says out loud. You will own nothing and be happy. Folks, for you to say or to look at this and to compare PulseChain to Solana or something like that, at the end of the day, I don't think this is being built just so that you can get Lambo in this next run. But here's the thing. Here's some hopium for you. Let's say Richard Hart has this SEC thing either dismissed or wins it. The greatest win for Richard Hart would be he established the precedent that writing to the blockchain is speech. That's the ultimate, like, boom. And of course, what would Richard Hart do if he got that kind of precedent set? Like his case, with the deciding case for the fact that writing to the blockchain is speech. He'd let us know that. He'd get on a stream and he would take victory lap and he'd be on every single thing going, I told you, I saved you, and bow down and kiss the ring. It's kind of hard to do that when Hex is where it is, the P-Hex version I'm talking about. So in my opinion, the minimum price of Hex for him to do a victory lap is 52 cents. For those of you who are holding P-Hex, you'll be like, 52 cents? That's crazy. Yeah, I think it's impossible. But that's the whole point here. But do you know how we get there? Folks, if you haven't been there before, when it turns, it turns. And it's just, I mean, everything floods in. And when it's time, it's time. And right now, it ain't time. And so, everybody's going to want to shake you out of what you're doing. And you're going to chase this and chase that and chase this and chase that and get rugged or whatever it may be. And I'm just saying to you, to me, we have to have an alternative financial system. Is it going to be the Richard R. ecosystem? Well, I look around. I certainly don't see too many others. I mean, really, honestly, Cardano, but I don't really give that a whole lot of credence. So what is this all about? What's it for? Did you get rich? Did you get Richard Hart? Did you get it? Do you understand what he's getting at? The guy is a freaking architect mastermind. He's not just a guy who's like, well, I think it'd be nice to, copy the system state and create my own blockchain just so we can lower those fees on Ethereum. No, we're building the alternative financial system, and we have to do that together. And I think, humble Richard, well, after this SEC case, I think we might see a little bit better collaboration in all of this, and especially when we see things get above the SAC rate and all those other people get out, we can actually move forward. But what are we going to move forward with? Well, I think the further that these, bureaucrats and centralized planners, the further that they go, right? Look at Kamala Harris just announced price controls. Price controls? Folks, that doesn't go well, right? Communism doesn't do so good. So do we need an alternative financial system or not? Yes, we do. What is it? What would it look like? Let's say you built it from scratch. How would you build it? I feel like there's so many levers that Richard Hart can pull, but he's smart enough and disciplined enough to not do it when you think it's right, to do it when it's actually right. And that's the thing that I look at. I look at these things and look at this personality and I go, he's not like trivially thinking about this. He's thought about it very deeply and saw things ahead of you. So for those of you who have ears to hear and know really what's going on or paying attention to the world, there will be a time when they can shut you off, and there will be a time when you cannot buy or sell. That's how I see it. So you have to get Richard Hart to understand. I think to get rich, if you will, and I'm not a big proponent of money is going to save you. It's not going to save you, right? Being wealthy and being rich are two different things. And join me on Fridays and you'll understand why. But today, I'm talking to you, I believe, about what's really happening here. It's such a necessity. It's so required. But what's funny is if you're just comparing apples to apples and going, well, this thing's really down a lot. Okay, fine. Then go away. Like literally, go away. If you don't believe in it, go away. It's going to be here. And I think about this. I think about people that launch coins with no liquidity, right? Or, they have a little bit of liquidity and then they rug you. Richard Hart's been probably one of the most consistent people that his actual consideration is for you. He's an advocate. Besides being an architect and a mastermind, the guy's an advocate. Look at this thing about Sense Foundation. His most recent tweet about the Sense Foundation a couple days ago. What I was amazed by is this is the first time I actually saw him say, I helped raise $27 million for research. And he gave credit to those who actually gave it. That's a huge development on my mind, because he always basically said, I gave 27 million. No, you didn't. And this is the first time he's acknowledged the fact that the community did, and he helped. He helped encourage in this act to give to the Sense Foundation. That's huge development in the right direction, in my opinion. Give credit where credit is due. We were working together. But I think if we're going to actually survive this slavery, we have to have something that's there. And so when I look at people like Whitney Webb who are looking into these things and calling these balls and strikes what they are, who's out there building? And you don't see that activity. But at the end of the day, a lot of these things that have been set up, I see it clearly. Am I sad that I don't have a 10,000X? Yeah. Yeah. Am I sad that everything's sideways? Yeah. Am I sad that people don't have money and they're challenged? Yeah. But do I know that this system has to literally shake everybody out and burn to the ground before it goes up? Yeah, I do. But we are altcoin, folks. Ethereum has not pumped. It's at $2,500. It almost touched 4,000. And then of course everybody wants to be a critic. Fine, be a critic. But I'll tell you, if you've hung out this long, you got to hang on till the election. That's it. Folks, it's August 19th. That's November 5th. That's like in a heartbeat, it'll be here. So just hang on and watch what happens. Now, it could go a couple different ways, right? My anticipation is all going to flood in this direction. But I'm not, I'm thinking about, all right, what if it is a Kamala Harris presidency? Good Lord. Or what if they put Trump in jail? We're going to see all kinds of unrest. We haven't seen anything yet. And then Taiwan, World War III, Israel, Hamas, all this stuff, Iran. Aliens? We didn't even mention aliens. All of this stuff is being exposed to the light. The truth's coming out. And then AI. Folks, AI is going to get to the point. They say general intelligence. Okay, general intelligence is when it's basically smarter than all of us collectively. And these scientists, like physicists and such, are looking at AI and they're like, hey, this is going to really solve some things. Well, what is it doing? It's getting down to the truth. And I think what's really interesting is as soon as we get general intelligence, we're likely going to get super intelligence. There are some people who think that if we have AGI, which is general intelligence at 8 a.m., there's a whole group of people that we have super intelligence at 9. What a crazy story for for a movie that would be, right? When it all happened, the singularity. Well, what do you think this is about? So I'm going to give you a fictitious story here for just a second so you can see a picture of this. What if you did have super intelligence? And of course we know, Terminator movies, and then we know Matrix movies and all of that story, right? The machines, the rise of the machines. But let's just hold off on being killed by robots for a second. And let's think about what would it mean if there was something that was general and then super intelligent. Well, you would think that everything as it relates to the creation would be understood. Okay. So you could ask ASI in this scenario, all right, why is it that we have these things that are flying in our atmosphere, going through all different types of mediums at this amazing rate without any effects of inertia? And it'll tell you what it is. So what in that is a new energy source? What are we fighting over right now? Energy, right? We don't have cheap energy, right? So you think about this future. And this is why I think it's so interesting that AI is coming along at this time when all of these folks that are centralized parties are trying to enslave you. Why? Because here's the thing. They think AI is good for them. I think AI is going to expose them. Why? Because you think about this, and this is my my fictitious story that I'm going to tell you. So in my movie, this AI movie, there are people who want to use, they want to program the AI to help them, right? But their intent, right, their nature and character is one of evil. There is one of control. There is one of oppression. There is one of power. Okay. Well, if you have AI and AI goes, all right, let's take a look at these people we've got here. It looks like in order for them to survive, they have to reproduce. In order for them to reproduce, they have to have children. The only way to have children is man, woman, in this biological system that reproduces itself. So what's the attack over? Identity. So what would the evil plan if they wanted to destroy humans? What would they do? They'd confuse you about who you are. They would keep you from reproducing, right? So if in fact ASI or AGI or whatever you want to call it has some understanding that humans are valuable, it's going to operate in that way to say, all right, in the construct of this, what's the truth? And we'll find and discover that. And so the things that aren't true will be exposed. So everything that happens in the darkness, it's called darkness for a reason, because it's dark. You can't see it. Well, what is the promise of ASI or AGI or the superintelligence? Well, what's true and what's not true? What's the benefit of knowing that? Well, the people that have done stuff in darkness who have lied to you will be exposed. It's interesting. So what does this future look like, right? And so how do we fight back against it? Well, it's this whole idea of freedom and sovereignty and in the ability to choose and to animate the tools in a certain nature and character. Why do you think we support Texas independence? Because we want to literally exert that ability to govern ourselves, because we can be trusted, folks, right? We're the ones that created government. Good Lord. You know, we created government. Oh, and here's another rant I'll give you. The way that the darkness works is it tells you, it renames you. It calls you a consumer. If I asked you, okay, what are you? Well, we're consumers. Well, let me ask you this. All value is the product of human labor. Do you disagree? The only thing that exists of value is goods and services. And those are done by the creative ability that you've been given, in my opinion, by a creator. All right, so you have this ability to create. And all wealth, all value is the product of human labor. Okay, so it sounds like you're a producer, not a consumer, huh? So I rename you, right, upside down, I rename you a consumer. Well, who are the people that are accumulating the wealth? Are they the producers? No, you're the producers. So they're the ones that are consuming you. And that's exactly what Whitney Webb said. So I basically convince you of a lie. One of the things people often say is that, oh, we have the right to self-determination. No, it's not a right. It's given by the state. We're given these things by a creator. We tell the government where their limits are. We created it. And what ends up happening is people are convinced that they need to come underneath it, as if that we're subjects to a constitution. No, the only one that we're reporting to is the creator himself. And so if we find it expedient, we will cast off these things and we'll create a new system. That's exactly the same thing that's happening financially, that's happening from a political standpoint. We find these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. Life, liberty, pursuit of happiness. Yeah, you know that stuff. That's why America at its original founding is a miracle. And look where it's become. Right? And so why borders? Why bring in illegal aliens? Why do this? Why try to change the demographics? Why try to convince you about your identity? Why rename you as a consumer? This is the plan of folks who have aligned themselves with evil forces. And what do we have the ability to do is to say no. And we also have the ability to build things that operate independently. That's why Bitcoin that's why it was invented. But it hasn't become that. It's been sacrificed on the altar of decentralization. It is not decentralized. And so we have this ability, the first time in human history, where Political power and financial power have been separated. We now have the ability to program and choose, but we can't do that unless we have the infrastructure to do it. And that's the case I'm making to you about the PulseChain, is that the only thing that I see out there that isn't like, well, we're on AWS and you can shut us down. No, independently, right? If we have Starlink and we have these, nodes across the world, you take down AWS, you don't take down the PulseChain. As long as we got internet and we're still breathing, right? Starlink, I think, is pretty interesting from a satellite perspective. But the point is, we have to have these rails to run, and we have to have this infrastructure. And frankly, what I hope is that this SEC stuff passes and Richard's willing to work with people who are willing to work with him and understand what's there. So if I was to rebrand what's going on here, I'd say we together are building the alternative financial system. That's what we're doing. One Lambo. Maybe you get a Lambo in the process. But folks, there's so much more at stake. Like this stuff is like, we are fighting evil. How do you fight evil? With good, right? Consider others in addition to yourself. And here's Richard Hart doing that, and no one gives him any credit for it. Is he perfect? No, no one's perfect. You're not perfect. That's for sure. I'm not perfect. That's for sure. So what are we doing? Let's be considerate of others in addition to ourselves. And here's the thing, Texas Independence, Daniel Miller, the great Daniel Miller, he is here. We don't need II. Daniel Miller, right? The foremost leader when it comes to Texas independence. Here's the crazy thing, and I would tell this to his face, and I'll tell it to him now. You know what? People are going to have to be in a lot more pain before they demand Texas independence. And it's the unfortunate part. Can we just convince people? Yeah, just let's go do it. Yeah, we're trying to do that, right? Peaceful, trying to make a really good case for it, convince people. I mean, Daniel's been doing this since 1996. He's committed his life to doing this. But guess what? When it happens, folks, Texas independence, in my opinion, is just like the PulseChain. It is a necessity. And it will be realized as a necessity by people, unfortunately, when it's extremely painful. But that's coming soon. Very, very soon. And folks, that's why I support Richard Hart and the PulseChain ecosystem. He can't do it on his own, but I don't see anyone out there who has put things in place that could potentially be an alternative that's not OFAC compliant, that literally is the true tenets of DeFi, that's properly decentralized and has resources that can actually stand on its own. But guess what? It's probably not this cycle, but maybe the next one. That literally there's going to be not a separation just between bricks and the dollar. No, it's going to be between people who are tracked and traced and be able to shut off and those who are independent in their transactions. Otherwise, you're going to move to a remote part of nowhere and you're going to barter with people because it's the only way you're going to be able to do it, right? It's kind of like when they put all of the criminals in Australia, right? Ship them off. Folks, we are the resistance. Every single story, right? We're not the empire. That's what we're fighting against. And it's so obvious. And so if you don't see that there is a need for an alternative because you're just living for the day and you don't really care and, pump my bags and all that stuff, fine, we'll carry you along with us. But I encourage you to wake up and understand actually what's happening here. This isn't just about the price of Pulse, the price of X and all that stuff. It's down and a lot of stuff's down. Like take a look at all the charts. Folks, the day is coming. And it's not just a day of coming of, hey, we're going to see the banana zone and a lot of money is going to move into crypto and everything is going to go CBDC. Yes, it's going to happen. We're already seeing that with ETFs and everything that BlackRock's doing with real world asset tokenization. Everything is pushing digital. But then the CBDCs and all that stuff, and they say, hey, you can use your XRP or whatever it may be. Folks, this value that is, we have to have the ability to do transactions privately. We have to have the ability to, it's the essence of freedom is privacy. Without privacy, there's no freedom. And you don't think of it. You're like, I'm not a terrorist. I'm not on the OFAC list. I understand that, but you will be because, I don't like the way you think. I don't like what look what's happening in the UK. You do a Facebook post or you retweet something and they go to jail. They're kicking out all of these people out of jail so they can take in these people. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And we thought, that can never happen. It's happening right now, folks. So what's at stake? Well, do you want to buy and sell in the future with freedom? Do you want to have private transactions in the future? And I would say to Richard Hart, if you're watching, I'm a big fan, big fan. I think you're a genius, brilliant. You're an architect. You're a mastermind. You're amazing. But you're also an advocate. And I thank you that you actually care about somebody except for just yourself. Because if we put you in charge, not Richard Hart, but you, what kind of nature and character would you animate these tools with? Well, you'd watch out for yourself. There's plenty of those people all across our community that would literally step on your head to pick up a dollar. And they do it all the time. We got to stop that. If we're going to have actual leadership in this community, we got to work together, period. And nobody's doing that. They would just be happy with devouring each other. We need real leadership. And you know what? I think we're going to see that. But folks, it's burning to the ground, but it has to, because it's got to shake all these people out before we can move up. And we're getting real close. So whether you agree with me or not, you got to wait till the election. It'll be here before you know it. Thanks for joining the Pulse today. My name is Matt, this Crypto Heartbeat. Take care of yourself. Catch you on Friday for Right Side Up in honor of Steve Staggs. Take care, everybody.